Welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha, a podcast shared by David Roylance. This podcast is dedicated to guiding you to completely eliminate the discontent mind and the suffering it causes by attaining enlightenment. Learn and practice the teachings of Gotama Buddha that will guide you to fully attain a peaceful, calm, serene, and content mind with joy. To support this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha or visit buddhadailywisdom.com, where you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online learning resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Now, here's our teacher to share more.
Sawadee Kap. Hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Today is our group learning program, and I'm going to be sharing with you Chapter 3 from our book, Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment. Chapter 3 is titled Enlightenment. What is enlightenment? In today's class, I'm going to describe what enlightenment is so that you'll understand what the Buddha is guiding you towards achieving. It's just like if you were going to visit some city, you would like to know something about that city and what's there so that you could even decide whether or not you're interested in traveling to the city. And then you'll be able to more easily navigate your way to it. And once you've actually arrived, you'll know that you've actually arrived to that city. So enlightenment is the same way. Right here at the very beginning of the book, before we really enter into the heart of the book, in Chapter 3, I help students to understand what is enlightenment so that you can more easily navigate your way to it. And once you've attained it, you'll know that you've actually attained it. So I'd like to welcome you to our class today, whether you're joining for the first time or you're joining regularly, and at the same time invite you to join for our meditation session. We're going to be starting with some breathing mindfulness meditation, and then I'm going to move into loving kindness meditation, and then back to breathing mindfulness meditation. We're going to wrap it all together with some chanting, and I'll guide you all the way through. So if you'd like to join in with the chanting, then I'll come in with the guidance for the two types of meditation that we're going to be doing today. And then after our meditation, that's where I'm going to start today's class, helping you guys to understand what is enlightenment. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Bhutang Bhagavanang Apivateyami Savakato Bhagavata Tammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Bhagavato Sāvaka Saṅkho Saṅghang Namami Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso Bhagava Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang Sammuno Sakhato Rokavitu Anutero Purisa Dhamma Sati Satatawa Manusanang Buddhang Arahato Bhagavati. Okay, with the lower body and hands and arms comfortable, in the upper body erect, just close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here you're just looking to establish the breath, a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. Not forced or controlled, just a gradual inhale through the nose, experiencing the full breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Your breath may not match up with the guidance that I'm providing, and that's okay. This is your practice. I'm just here for guidance. You can use this voice as a reminder that whenever you get to the next inhale, breathing gradually through the nose, developing a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose, experiencing the full breath. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the breath well established, start fixating the mind on the breath, either the sound of the breath coming into the nose or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the mind fixated on the breath, whenever you notice that it moves off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. No need to observe the thought, label it, judge it, analyze it, or even try to figure out where it's coming from. Whenever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. Then I'll be back with more guidance on loving kindness meditation. You have nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. No one needs you right now. This is your time to focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. Continuing to breathe in through the nose and out through the nose. Repeat these phrases in the mind on the out breath. May I be peaceful. May I be safe. May I be well. May I be free of all discontentedness and the suffering that it causes. May Mom and Dad be peaceful. May they be safe. May they be well. May they be free of all discontentedness in the suffering that it causes. May my family, friends, neighbors, and co-workers all be peaceful. May they be safe. May they be well. May May they be free of all discontentedness and the suffering that it causes. May all those who have caused me harm be peaceful. May they be safe. May they be well. May they be free of all discontentedness and the suffering that it causes. May all those who I have harmed be peaceful. May they be safe. May they be well. May they be free of all discontentedness and the suffering that it causes. May all beings, wherever they reside, be peaceful. May they be safe. May they be well. May they be free of all discontentedness in the suffering that it causes. Now return back to breathing mindfulness meditation, focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. Breathing in and out. Arahang Sama Sambuddho Mahakawa Photang Mahakavanang Apivateyami Savakato Mahakavata Tammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Bhagavato Sāvaka Saṅkho Saṅghang Namami. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Iti piso emagawa arahang samma sambuddho vicacaranang sammuno sakato rokavitu Anutero purisa dhamma sati satatawa manusanang poto bhagavati. Okay, if you'd like to slowly make your way out of meditation. Once again, welcome to all of you guys. Nice to see everyone in class today, whether you're joining in Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom. Welcome to all of you guys, even to everyone who's joining through the replay. If you're watching this or listening to this after the class, welcome to everyone. As I was mentioning, today I'm going to be sharing with you Chapter 3 of our book, Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment. This particular chapter is helping you to understand what enlightenment is, and it's the actual start of the real heart of the book. Over the next several weeks, from Chapter 3 to Chapter 11, this is the real heart of the book. And right here up front, at the very beginning of the book, I help students to be able to understand what is enlightenment. Because if you're going to navigate your way to enlightenment, you need to know what it is, so that that way you can more easily navigate your way to it. So as we go in class today, just like always, you're going to be able to ask any and all questions that you like. I'm going to be pausing a few times throughout our class. And if you'd like to ask questions, if you're in Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, you can put that into the comment section. I'll be able to see that and answer your question. And if you're in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand, unmute your microphone, and then ask any and all questions that you like. So by understanding what enlightenment is, you're going to be able to more easily navigate your way to it. And oftentimes people are confused about what this really is. So I'm going to help you guys to understand it. And by the end of our discussion, you're going to know more about it than you do right now. But it's important to understand that it's a challenge for the unenlightened mind to understand what enlightenment is. It's kind of like if I were to sit here and explain to you what chocolate ice cream tastes like, and you've never tasted chocolate ice cream. You'll know more about what chocolate ice cream tastes like when we're done with our conversation, but you're not going to fully understand what chocolate ice cream tastes like until you actually taste it yourself. So it's the same kind of thing with this topic of enlightenment, that by the time we're done today, you're going to know more about enlightenment than you do right now, much more. But you're not going to fully understand it by the time that we're done. As you make your way closer and closer to enlightenment and you start seeing the qualities of enlightenment starting to shine through, that's where you'll really start to understand what enlightenment is. Enlightenment is the ultimate goal of the teachings of the Buddha. And as we go here, you can ask any and all questions that you like to be able to understand it. So what enlightenment is it's a mental state that you attain during this life or at death, where the mind's completely peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. This is a permanent mental state that it's physically impossible for the enlightened mind to experience feelings like anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy. all of those will never be experienced ever again by an individual who's enlightened. This is a permanent mental state. All discontentedness will be eliminated 100%. You'll notice that the mind is concentrated, that it's steady, it's unshakable, that the mind is stable, that there's nothing that can shake up the mind, that your mind will be calm and relaxed, yet attentive and alert. This is a mental state that you can attain during this life. And then for the rest of your life, you're going to experience these qualities and others that we're going to talk about as we go in our class today. You can also attain enlightenment at death as well. That's not ideal, but it is possible. It's the next best thing, because at least if you attain enlightenment at death, you're not going to be experiencing rebirth. So if at any point that you experience enlightenment, you'll know that your mind has done so, because it'll be 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, you're not experiencing any discontentedness whatsoever. And having experienced enlightenment and you're knowing your mind is enlightened, you'll also know that you're not going to be coming back into the world to experience life over and over and over again. Now, I know that I've shared with you guys that in this particular program, I don't really talk much about the cycle of rebirth, but just understand as part of the definition of what enlightenment is, you need to understand that there is no rebirth for an individual who has experienced enlightenment. That by uprooting the causes and conditions that are producing the discontent feelings, not only will you no longer experience discontentedness, but those same causes and conditions are the same things that are producing rebirth. So by eliminating discontentedness and the causes that lead to that, you'll actually also eliminate the causes and conditions that lead to rebirth. So there won't be any further existence in the cycle of rebirth. But the Buddha leaves it as an undeclared teaching for what happens next for an enlightened being. The Buddha didn't teach what happens once you get to enlightenment and then you die. He left that as an undeclared teaching. And there's multiple reasons why I think he did this. And if you're interested to know those, you guys can ask me and I'll share it with you during our question period. But he wisely left it as an undeclared teaching because his teachings aren't about getting to this wonderful afterlife. It's about getting to peace and joy, contentedness, the ideal life now in this existence. It's not about what's going to come next. But I can share with you more details on why I think that he left it as an undeclared teaching. So this is a mental state that you attain during this life. It's a permanent mental state. And it's being accomplished through eradication of pollutions of mind. The mind will be free of what's called craving, anger, and ignorance. This is a high-level way of referring to the pollutions that are in the mind. In a moment, I'm going to introduce you to the 10 fetters, the 10 individual pollutions, which we've talked about in previous classes if you were in those classes. But if not, I'd share it with you here as well, where we go into some more detail about the 10 fetters. Those are the most detailed level description that the Buddha has of the pollutions that are in the mind. But when we talk about them from a high level, we talk about them as craving, anger, and ignorance. And we're going to be talking about this when we get to chapter 8 of the book. But just as a little bit of kind of introduction to this, the craving is the longing, the yearning, the chasing after the objects of your affection. And when the mind gets what it wants, it gets pleasant feelings like happiness, excitement, elation, thrill, exhilaration, euphoria. But when the mind's not getting what it wants, it gets painful feelings like anger, sadness, frustration, and others. And when that anger is arising, that's where the mind becomes unskillful. It will tend to push people away or push the situation away. This is called aversion. Or the mind will be bitter and harsh and hostile through your intentions, your speech, and your actions. It's almost like an animal growling and roaring at another animal. Or you might start putting your expectations on someone and trying to control them and force them to do things your way. And where all of this is coming from is the unknowing of true reality, the lack of wisdom, that the mind just doesn't understand what it doesn't understand. In the unenlightened state, the mind firmly believes that its anger is coming from something external. It thinks that mom and dad or brothers and sisters or your boss or your coworkers or people like this or some situation external is causing these feelings. But it's actually the mind itself that's causing this. And it's these pollutions of craving, anger, and ignorance. So by the time you get to enlightenment, you will have purified the mind of all these pollutions. So while enlightenment itself is a mental state that you attain during this life or at death, the path to enlightenment is a purification of the mind, where you're training the mind to eliminate the causes and conditions that are keeping it in the unenlightened state. The causes and conditions that are keeping it in the unenlightened state are these pollutions: craving, anger, and ignorance. And in more detail, it's the 10 fetters. Now, some people, when they describe enlightenment, they talk about it as happiness or ultimate bliss. I don't describe it that way, although there's plenty of happiness in the enlightened mental state. It's just that I don't describe it this way because oftentimes when people are talking about this ultimate bliss that the mind is experiencing, what they are most likely referring to is what's called the jhanas. The jhanas are 4 preliminary phases that the mind goes through where you're experiencing enhanced qualities of mind before you get to the first stage of enlightenment. There's 4 stages of enlightenment, which I'm going to teach you today. And as your mind is moving towards the first stage of enlightenment, you will experience these jhanas. These are enhanced qualities of mind. And when you get into the first jhana, there's oftentimes this ultimate bliss or excitement, elation that the mind experiences when it gets into that first jhana. Some people might call it happiness. And oftentimes when people are experiencing this, they think they're actually enlightened because the difference between being off the path to enlightenment to experiencing the jhanas is like night and day. And sometimes it's so enhanced in terms of the qualities that you're experiencing, it's beyond what anybody could ever have imagined that they think that they're actually enlightened. But there's much more room to grow beyond that. So if somebody's in the jhanas thinking that they're enlightened, they're going to be describing what they're experiencing as enlightenment. This is where you'll hear some people that will tell you that enlightened beings still get angry or frustrated or sad or something like this. And I can assure you that that's not the case, but there's people out there that will explain enlightened beings that they still experience that. That's because those individuals think they're enlightened. They're still experiencing sadness, anger, and frustration and these other discontent feelings, and they're describing what they're experiencing as enlightenment. And there's also this conditioned happiness that you experience when you're in the jhanas. So sometimes people explain it as happiness, and I don't explain enlightenment as happiness, although there's plenty of happiness. What you experience in the unenlightened state, and even in the jhanas, you experience conditional happiness. That based on some condition, your mind's going to be happy. Like if it's sunny outside, you might be happy. Or if your bank account balance is up here, you might be happy. Or if you get a new car, you might be happy because of the new car. Or if you get a raise at work, you're going to be happy because of that. That's the condition that the mind is basing its happiness on. So the mind is happy, oh, I'm so happy, yay. The mind is like, bouncing off the walls almost. That's like conditioned happiness. But if the mind's not there, it might go down to the sadness, right? But the happiness that you experience in the enlightened mental state is not conditional happiness. It's unconditional happiness. The mind is joyful and glad and cheerful. It's uplifted all the time. It's not this bouncing off the walls happiness, but it's that the mind is just always uplifted. It's always cheerful. It's always bright. It's always glad. It's unconditioned. There's no condition that needs to be met in order for that happiness to exist in the mind. And because people aren't familiar with that, if I described enlightenment as happiness, they would think that it's this conditional happiness that you experience in the unenlightened state. Like based on some condition, you will now be happy because you've experienced that. So I tend to refer to the happiness that you experience in the enlightened mental state as joy. It's a mental state where the mind is just always uplifted and joyful. There doesn't need to be any condition met. Where in the unenlightened state, it's like if the weather is this, if my bank account is this, if my mom and dad do this, if my life partner does this, if my children do this, if I have this size of a house, if I have this type of car, if I have this, then I will be happy, right? So the amount of happiness shrinks because there's all these conditions that have to be met. And this is conditional happiness. But the enlightened mind is beyond all of this. The enlightened mind's happy no matter what's happening in day-to-day life. So that's why I don't describe enlightenment as happiness, although there's plenty of happiness in the enlightened mental state. It's unconditioned happiness or unconditioned joy, where the mind is glad and cheerful and bright and uplifted. So this is what enlightenment is. The advantages of getting to enlightenment is, as we've already been sharing, is that the mind is peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. It's a permanent mental state. It's physically impossible for the mind to experience any of these feelings that I always talk about, right? Sadness, anger, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy. All these feelings and others are completely eliminated because you've purified the mind. The causes and conditions that produce those feelings have been eradicated and eliminated from the mind, so the mind doesn't experience that anymore. If the cause and condition was something external that was causing your mind to be angry and frustrated, you'd never actually be able to eliminate it, because you can't control the outside world. You can't control mom and dad or brothers and sisters to do things your way. But because these feelings are being caused internally within your own mind, you can actually eliminate them. And it's through purifying the mind that the mind accomplishes that, through eradicating the 10 fetters. As you purify your mind, you're going to notice that there's a high degree of focus, concentration, memory, and clarity of mind, because the mind's performing optimally. As you're getting closer and closer to enlightenment, that pollution being out of the mind, you're no longer carrying around that burden of those pollutions. So now there's this focus, concentration, memory, and clarity of mind. You're going to notice that you have deep wisdom about the world and the way the world functions around you. You're going to have wisdom about things in the world that other people don't have. Things that are just so easy and simple for you are so complicated and difficult for other people. You'll notice that you'll be able to be polite, kind, friendly, and respectful towards all beings, where right now you might find that to be a challenge. There might be certain relationships that you really struggle in, where maybe you are bitter and harsh and hostile. Maybe you're impolite, unkind, unfriendly, and disrespectful. But this is coming from one's own mind. And when you see that clearly, you can learn then how to improve that. As long as you believe that your bitterness and harshness and hostility is justified in coming from other people, then you'll continue to do it. But when you accept responsibility for your own intentions, your speech and your actions, the way your mind thinks, the way you interact with people, when you take responsibility for that, then you can actually work to improve it through cultivation of wisdom and through training your mind. So by the time you get to enlightenment, it doesn't matter what's going on, you can always be polite, kind, friendly, and respectful with everybody around you. You'll notice that because of that, you're not causing harm to other people. You're not causing harm in the world, so therefore harm isn't coming back to you. And because of your ability to be so polite, kind, friendly, and respectful, you'll find it very easy to make friends, and you'll be able to conduct your personal and professional relationships with ease. Your relationships will really be blossoming because you're not being bitter and harsh and hostile any longer. In fact, you won't even be able to be in a bad mood by the time you get to enlightenment. It's physically impossible for an enlightened being to be in a bad mood. So these are the advantages of actually getting to enlightenment. And the way that an individual would make their way to enlightenment is start to focus on the core central teachings of the Buddha. And over the next several weeks in this program, I'm going to be teaching all of these things, and then even more as part of this program. The 3 universal truths, the 4 noble truths, the Eightfold Path, the 5 precepts. You're going to be learning all of these in the next few weeks. Then there's something called the Brahma Viharas that we're going to study when we get to chapter 14. These are 4 healthy mental states that are going to transform your mind away from unwholesome mental states. These are things like loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. So I'm going to be teaching you guys what those are and what is it antidoting, what is it fixing as part of the mind. You're about to be introduced to the 10 fetters here in a moment, and you might have already learned that with me in a prior class. These are the 10 pollutions that you need to understand and how to eliminate them. But early on, you don't really focus on these too much because all of these things over here, the 3 universal truths, the 4 noble truths, the Eightfold Path, and the 5 precepts, is helping you to eliminate these 10 fetters. That's why you focus on these first and get that built up and really strong. And then as you start experiencing the jhanas, then you pivot and you start focusing on the 10 fetters. I teach a retreat here in Chiang Mai every August where I spend an hour to an hour and a half on each individual fetter. I explain what it is, what the symptoms are, how to eliminate it, and how to know that you've actually eliminated it. And I, of course, live stream that and I record it as well. So if somebody wasn't able to make it to Chiang Mai, they can learn it that way. And then there's the 7 factors of enlightenment. This is actually a tool to fine-tune the mind to be able to move it towards the middle. Sometimes people think that this is to determine whether you are enlightened or you aren't enlightened, but this isn't actually true. This is a tool to kind of bring the mind to the middle and fine-tune it. Then, of course, there's extensive meditation training. And that's why I'm doing these 4-part series at the very beginning of our group learning program to help you build up your meditation practice. You're going to need to do a lot of meditation over the course of multiple years in order to move the mind to enlightenment. And the way that you're approaching these teachings is through learning them, examining them, investigating them, through reflecting on them to independently verify whether they're true or false, and then you're practicing them, integrating them into your day-to-day life, and that's what's transforming your mind and getting rid of these pollutions. So I'm going to pause here and see if you guys have any questions on what I've been talking about so far. And then we're going to talk about the 10 fetters and the 4 stages of enlightenment. And we're going to talk about some other things as well. So if you have questions, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. This looks like Slav has a question. Go ahead, sir.
I have a question, Teacher Dave. It's true, it's possible, it's quite opposite. It's impossible to achieve enlightenment without attain jhana.
Yes, every individual who's going to make it to enlightenment will have already experienced the jhanas. But oftentimes what people are learning about the jhanas that is out there in kind of the world, it's not actually true. What I teach you about the jhanas is what the Buddha teaches you. These are phases that the mind goes through where you're experiencing enhanced qualities, and you'll be experiencing these jhanas throughout your entire journey to enlightenment and when the mind is actually enlightened. What oftentimes people teach you that the jhanas are is they teach you that it's something that's only experienced in meditation and that they're produced by meditation. This isn't actually true. There's the moral conduct and the meditation and all the other factors of the Eightfold Path that need to come together in order to be able to make it into the jhanas. And then as you're making your way through the jhanas, you'll know that you're doing that, and then you'll be able to make your way to the first stage of enlightenment. So without having experienced the jhanas, you wouldn't be able to even get to the first stage of enlightenment, let alone enlightenment itself, because you're going to need these enhanced qualities of mind that are experienced as you're making your way through the jhanas.
And it's supposed to be attain 4 jhana, right? Not first one, second one.
There's 4 jhanas, so you'll go through each of the 4 phases. The first one, second one, third one, and fourth one. And then from the 4th jhana, your mind will then move into the first stage of enlightenment. In the jhanas, your mind can still regress if you became complacent. But once you get to the first stage of enlightenment, your mind can't regress backwards from there.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. Okay, I don't see any other questions anywhere. So now what I'm going to do is introduce you to these fetters. And for those of you guys who were in a recent class that I taught a few weeks ago, you have already been introduced to these, but this will be another opportunity for you to learn a bit about them. We refer to them as the fetters, or the taints, or pollutions, or defilements. These are all ways that the Buddha referred to them as well. But typically, when we're formally referring to them, we refer to them as the 10 fetters. Because during the lifetime of the Buddha, if you were a criminal, they would attach a fetter around your ankle. This was a shackle and a chain and a ball. And they would keep you confined in a certain field. This is what they would do with prisoners. Where today we put them in jail cells or prison cells, where during the lifetime of the Buddha, they just attached a fetter to your ankle, the shackle and chain and ball, and they would keep you in this field. And that would keep you confined to that area. So when the Buddha discovers these 10 pollutions or these 10 fetters in the mind, he refers to them as fetters because it's keeping the mind trapped in this unenlightened state, experiencing discontentedness over and over and over again, where you're experiencing anger, sadness, frustration, and all these other feelings. If it wasn't for these fetters, your mind would be bright and cheerful and uplifted. So it's not a sudden thing that you're getting to enlightenment. It's gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress that leads to enlightenment. It's through elimination of these 10 fetters. So you can see that it's not an instantaneous thing. This is one of the biggest myths about the life story of the Buddha is people think he sat under a tree, he meditated, and he instantly got to enlightenment. And if you study his original teachings, you'll see that that isn't true, that he talks very clearly and explains that it's gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress that leads to enlightenment. And it's the eradication of these pollutions. So you can't eliminate these in the snap of a finger. So I'm going to walk you through these. And as I do, remember, none of the teachings of the Buddha are about belief. So what you would like to do is listen to what it is that I share about each one of these fetters, because as I share what it is and I share the symptoms of it, you're going to be able to independently verify that your mind has these fetters, because you'll know that I haven't necessarily known your life inside and out, backwards and forwards, but yet I'm explaining exactly certain things that you experience on a day-to-day basis because of these fetters. So this is how you independently verify that what I'm sharing with you is the truth, that your mind actually has these fetters, because you're not interested in believing me about any of these things. You need to learn, reflect, and practice. So personal existence view is where the mind has this misunderstanding or confusion that it thinks that this body or this mind is you and who you are as a person. So the mind will cling to your self-image or your self-identity, thinking that this is you. And now, when you're in certain situations, you will experience either conditioned pleasant feelings, painful feelings, or neither painful nor pleasant feelings based on this. So, for example, if you were ever in a social situation and you spilt something on your clothing and you were embarrassed, this is your personal existence view. The mind wants to be perceived by others in a certain way. And as long as you're being perceived that way, you're happy. But when you spill something on this clothing and now your mind is clinging to this self-image, thinking that this is who you are and you want to be perceived a certain way by other people, you're not being perceived that way because you now have food on your clothing, you'll be embarrassed. If you've ever stood in front of your closet thinking, who am I going to see today and how do I want to look? And you went through your clothing to find a specific clothing that you would like to wear, maybe even trying on 2 or 3 or 4 different outfits and looking in the mirror and finally feeling comfortable. I can go outside today. Or if you've ever looked in the mirror and you saw a pimple or a mole or a wrinkle or a gray hair, or you started losing your hair and you were shaken up by that, that is your personal existence view, that you wanted to be perceived by others in a certain way. And when you weren't being perceived that way, your mind was shaken up by that. Or I often tell people about when I was a child, I used to stand in front of the mirror with gel and mousse and I would run it through my hair and I would try to get every little hair in exactly the right spot. And I didn't feel comfortable going out to school until every little hair was in the right spot. And sometimes I would even miss the school bus on the way to do this. So this is the self-image part of personal existence view, clinging to this body, wanting to be perceived by others in a certain way. And you can only feel comfortable if you're being perceived that way, because the mind doesn't understand impermanence in the unenlightened state, that this body can't look a certain way permanently. It's just not possible. But that's what the mind's trying to do with personal existence view. It's clinging to this body, wanting to appear a certain way permanently, or a certain self-identity. This is where you might have certain things in terms of your culture, your ethnicity, your sexual orientation, your nationality, your job or occupation, where you're clinging to a certain identity of who you think you are as a person. Maybe I am American, or I am Romanian, or I am Spanish, or I am Lithuanian, or I am a Brit, or I am an Aussie, or I am Brazilian. Any of this I am around your culture, ethnicity, sexual orientation, your nationality, your job or occupation. If you cling to any of these things, then you can only feel comfortable when those things are intact. So for example, if you were ever in a relationship with a boyfriend or girlfriend or husband or wife, and you identified with, I am a boyfriend, I am a girlfriend, or I am a husband, I am a wife. When you guys broke up, you might have felt uncomfortable in that situation. You might have felt like you wanted to hurry up and get right back into another relationship. That's what the mind thought was going to solve this uncomfortableness, because the mind didn't identify with, I am single. So when now you're experiencing singleness, the mind wasn't comfortable with that and felt like it wanted to hurry up and get right back into another relationship, but that's not going to solve the problem, right? The problem is this pollution where it's identifying with this particular role as who you are. Or say you have a certain job or occupation, like I am a police officer. And now as long as you're doing that job, you feel great, but maybe you get fired, you get injured, you retire, something like this, and now you're sitting at home or you're a taxi driver, and the mind doesn't identify with I am a taxi driver. It thinks I am a police officer. And now it's uncomfortable driving around town taking people in a taxi because it really is clinging to this identity of I am a police officer. So this personal existence view is going to take your mind up and down as long as you cling to this self-image or this self-identity thinking that this is who you are. And there's multiple examples that I've given at different times about personal existence view, and I'm going to have a class on that when we get to chapter 16. It's all about helping you to eliminate personal existence view, where I'll go into a lot of detail about this. Then there's something called doubt. What doubt is where you have doubt about the teachings and their ability of them to attain enlightenment. This is very common for somebody to have doubt. And if you have doubt right now, no worries. Everybody pretty much has doubt when they first come to the path to enlightenment because they don't even know the teachings of the Buddha. How can you have confidence in something if you don't even know what they are? So if you have doubt about the teachings of the Buddha and the ability of them to attain enlightenment, that's normal, but it will hinder you, and it is a pollution. It'll block you from getting to enlightenment. So what people can oftentimes doubt is they will doubt whether the Buddha even lived or not. They will doubt his teachings and whether or not they can actually lead to enlightenment. They might doubt the community that they're part of, the people and the students that are part of the community. They will maybe doubt these people. You might doubt your teacher and that person's ability to help you get to enlightenment. Or you might doubt your own ability to get to enlightenment. You might think, that enlightenment stuff's for other people. Well, if you have doubt, that's normal. But the way that you eliminate this is not through blind belief or faith or anything like that. The way you eliminate your doubt is through investigation of the teachings. When you investigate and you examine the teachings of the Buddha and you learn them intellectually, then you reflect on them to independently verify whether they're true or they're false. Then you start practicing them, integrating them into your day-to-day life. This is where the real transformation is happening to your mind and your life. Over time, if you put together enough practice, you'll be able to see significant improvement in your day-to-day functioning of your mind and your life. And that's where you'll eventually get to the point where you have no doubt that these teachings are leading to enlightenment. You won't be enlightened yet by the time you eliminate your doubt, but you'll know with 100% certainty that these teachings are working and leading towards your enlightenment. So you'll ultimately get to the point where you have confidence in the Buddha, the teachings, the community, your teacher, and your own ability to get to enlightenment because you're making your way to enlightenment. You see that you're actually doing the work and it's actually working. So if you have doubt right now, you can actually turn this into a healthy doubt. The way that you do this is you harness this doubt and you turn it into an inquisitive mind where, let's just say you have doubt. You might say, yeah, I doubt the teachings of the Buddha. I don't know whether they lead to enlightenment or not. This isn't true for me. I don't have any doubt. I know with 100% certainty that they work. But let's just say somebody has doubt. They could say, yeah, I have doubt about the teachings of the Buddha. You know what? I don't know if they lead to enlightenment or not. So I'm going to sink my teeth in. I'm going to investigate and examine them. And I'm going to reflect on them to independently verify if they're true or false. And then I'm going to practice them and see the truth for myself of whether or not they actually work. And if you harness this doubt and turn it into an inquisitive mind, ultimately, if you do enough work, you'll eliminate your doubt because you'll see the improvement to the condition of your mind in your life. Then there's something called wrong behavior and observances. There's two sides to this fetter. What wrong behavior is that in the unenlightened state, there's a certain amount of moral conduct that an individual is engaged in that is unwise. And as long as you keep putting out that moral conduct, then there's going to be certain harms that come back to you. Let's just say you're bitter and harsh and hostile and aggressive in your relationships with other people. Well, when you're putting that out, that's just going to come back to you. So as long as you have wrong behavior, you're not going to be able to clean up your mind and clean up your life because the mind's still polluted with this unwise moral conduct. And now whenever you're putting that out, it's going to produce unwholesome results for you. And now it's just going to come back to you. And oftentimes people feel like they're justified in their aggression and their hostility and their bitterness because they don't understand that what's truly causing that is your own mind. They think it's other people that are causing them to be angry and frustrated. So they'll think that their conduct and being bitter, harsh, and hostile is justified. But when you break through to the Four Noble Truths and you understand that it's your own mind that's causing these feelings, then you understand that this moral conduct needs to be improved because as long as you're unwise in the way that you interact with people with your moral conduct, that's just going to all come back to you. It's kind of like if you had a oil pipe and it busted and it was spewing oil all over the world. you would like to shut that down as soon as possible. You're not going to go clean up the mess on the floor. You're going to shut down the oil pipe so that it doesn't keep spewing oil all over the world. Well, if you keep spewing your unwise moral conduct all over the world, it's just going to keep coming back to you. You're going to have a real mess in your relationships. So if you bring your moral conduct up to the level that you see in the Eightfold Path in terms of right speech, right action, and right livelihood, that is eliminating wrong behavior. And now your conduct has been purified to a certain degree. Then there's wrong observances. What this is where the mind believes that rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship or prayer is going to lead to some kind of beneficial result. So the mind will perhaps do rites, rituals, ceremonies, or worship. And in this situation, the mind doesn't understand what the underlying problem is. The underlying problem that the Buddha discovered is this lack of wisdom in the mind, the unknowing of true reality, the ignorance, the confusion, the misunderstanding. So the mind thinks if someone gets sprinkled some water on you or tie some strings on your wrist, or maybe you take a wafer on your tongue, or you drink a little bit of wine at some ceremony, that somehow this is going to improve your life. But these rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship don't lead to the cultivation of wisdom. So it's never going to transform your mind as long as you think or you believe that rites, rituals, ceremonies, worship, superstitious and auspicious things are going to lead to some beneficial result. So whether you do these things or not, whether you do anything at all, it's your decisions in life. But by the time somebody's eliminated this fetter, this wrong observances, they will know in their mind that rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship doesn't lead to beneficial results. And oftentimes people have already eliminated this before they even come study with me, because they've done these things other places and they see that they still get angry, they still get frustrated, and they're looking for answers. And they know that I don't do rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship. So oftentimes people have already eliminated this. But like I mentioned, if you do these things or not, it's a choice for you to make. You might go out for a family event. Maybe you're going to the church or the synagogue or the temple or the mosque or something like this, and your family has come together and now you guys are going out for some big event. And maybe you decide to go with them, and now you're there and everybody's involved in these rituals and ceremonies or what have you. And maybe your mind knows that these things aren't going to lead to enlightenment and wisdom in the mind, but maybe you're just kind of there as a result of spending time with your family. So this is something that someone might choose to do. So wrong behavior and observances are connected together because the wrong behavior is coming from a lack of wisdom. And if someone continues to think that they can just do rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship in order to improve their conduct and improve what they experience on a day-to-day basis, they're never going to get to improvement in their day-to-day life as long as they're out there being bitter and harsh and hostile to people. It doesn't matter how many rituals and ceremonies you do. You go out into the parking lot and now you're bitter and harsh and hostile with people. You're not going to have a peaceful and joyful mind and a peaceful and joyful life. Then there's sensual desire. What sensual desire is where the mind is longing and yearning through the eyes, the ears, the nose, the tongue, the body, and then the mind itself, wanting permanently agreeable contact through these sense bases. So I'll give you some examples. If the mind experiences contact through the sense bases and it's agreeable to you, you'll experience pleasant feelings like happiness, excitement, elation, thrill, exhilaration, euphoria. But if you experience contact through your sense bases and it's disagreeable to you, you'll experience painful feelings like anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, or some other very painful feeling. So let's just say you're at a stoplight and a car pulls up next to you with some music that you find agreeable. You might get really happy and excited. You might get pleasant feelings based on hearing this sound through your ear that you find to be agreeable. And now maybe you're even dancing in your seat, having a good old time. But then you go up to the next traffic light and you hear a different type of music. Somebody pulls up to you with music that you find to be disagreeable. And now you're frustrated or agitated or annoyed. It's not the music that's causing that. And it's not the person who's playing the music. It's the mind's central desire. The mind is craving permanently agreeable contact through the ears, and the mind finds this particular sound to be disagreeable. So that's where the painful feelings arise, the frustration or annoyment. Or say you're walking down the street and you walk past a flower shop and you smell this wonderful odor coming out of the flower shop. Wow, so pleasant. You get all these happy and excited feelings. But then you walk a few more steps and you smell the sewer. And now you're repulsed and you're like, ugh, that's horrible. And now you're frustrated or agitated or annoyed. This is your central desire that's causing this. So your 6 sense bases are what's causing the mind to go up and down because of its longing, yearning for permanently agreeable contact through the eyes, the ears, the nose, the tongue, the body, and then the mind itself. And you could probably come up with examples for all of these. And if you need help with that, I can help you with it. But let me give you some examples for the mind, because this is the one that people sometimes have challenges with. Let's just say in the present moment, you are thinking about something in the past that was either very pleasurable for you or very painful for you. Maybe like some kind of abuse that you had as a child. Well, now in the present moment, thinking about that in the past, you're forming painful feelings in the present moment. There hasn't been any contact through the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, the body itself, but it's just the mind thinking about the past and now forming feelings in the present moment based on something in the past. Now, some people refer to this as trauma, and they think that you can never eliminate this from the mind. This is not true. This is just the mind clinging and holding on to things in the past. The mind is having central desire where it's longing and yearning, and now it's going to have either pleasant or painful feelings in the present moment based on things that happened in the past. But you can train your mind to let that go. By the time you get to enlightenment, you'll remember that you had those experiences in the past, but you won't be forming feelings on it now in the present moment. Because if you continue to do that, you can never get free of this experience that happened in the past. But you can actually train your mind to let that go and no longer do that. And then the mind can do this for the future as well, where your mind can have certain longing, yearning about the future. There's certain central desire. You could get really excited about some trip that you're about to take, and you're so excited and you just can't wait to go. And now in the present moment, you're experiencing these conditioned, pleasant feelings. But then when you show up to the airport and your flight is delayed or it's canceled, now you'll be frustrated because you allowed your mind to be longing, yearning for that trip in the future. Or you could also be fearful or having guilt or shame or anxiety or stress about something in the future. This is all happening with inside the mind. There hasn't been any contact through the sense bases. It's just the mind itself. So this central desire is what's causing the mind to experience the up and down because it wants permanently agreeable contact when it can't get that because it lives in an impermanent world. It's physically impossible for you to experience permanently agreeable contact through the 6 sense bases. And as I mentioned, if the central desire is getting fulfilled, you get pleasant feelings. But then if it's not getting fulfilled, you get painful feelings or neither painful nor pleasant. And when those painful feelings are arising, the unenlightened mind will falsely attribute it to something external. This is where your ill will can come up, where you can be hostile and bitter and harsh and aggressive, frustrated, agitated, annoyed. You can have resentment towards other beings. And this is where your conduct becomes unskillful, where you push people away or you push the situation away, thinking that that's going to solve the problem. But you can see that that didn't solve the problem because when you push people away out of your life, you still get angry, you still get frustrated, you still get annoyed. Or you might be bitter and harsh and hostile through your intentions, your speech, and your actions. It's almost like an animal growling and roaring at another animal. It's like, do things my way. It's like trying to fear this being into doing things your way, trying to get your central desire fulfilled. Or you might put your expectations on someone and try to control them and force them, pressure them into doing things your way. Again, the mind's trying to get its central desires fulfilled. But as long as you're having this ill will and this unskillful conduct is happening, you're going to have disharmony in your relationships. If you're experiencing broken relationship after broken relationship after broken relationship, this is why. Because the mind is having this central desire, it's not getting its desires fulfilled, it's attributing that painful feelings to something external, and then when this ill will is arising, you might be pushing people away, being bitter, harsh, and hostile, or pressuring them, attempting to pressure them to do things your way. So as long as the mind is doing these things, you can't live harmoniously with all beings. But there's solutions to all of these. Right now, I'm just kind of introducing you to what they are, giving you a little bit of the solutions, but really it's the whole program that's going to help you. The whole path to enlightenment is what's going to help you to eliminate these. So I'm going to pause here and see what questions you guys have before we move to the higher fetters. Remember, you can put those questions into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. So I see some questions here in Zoom. It looks like Julie's asking, Teacher David, it is hard not to have personal existence view by living in this realistic, I think you mean materialistic world. As a professional person, I do feel I need to present myself in a way that is neat, professional, and confident. It is to me important to show people I am a person who takes care of myself and will take care of my work as well. And dressing for work sometimes is to make myself feel happy, not to please others. Is that okay? Well, I'm not here to tell you what's okay or not okay. I'm here to help you to be able to see what is causing your discontentedness and then helping you get to a place where you don't experience that anymore. So an individual who's eliminated personal existence view, it's still possible to go to work looking nice and present yourself in the way that you're talking about. But right now, what you're experiencing is your mind's clinging to this, and it's a source of your conditioned feelings. So as long as you're having those conditioned feelings, then you're not going to experience a permanent peace and permanent joy. So it's not a matter of like showing up to work with like ripped jeans and, mud on your face and things like this. That's not what it means to eliminate your personal existence view. It means to not form your inner feelings based on this self-image or any potential self-identity in the mind. So there's certain training that you need to employ in order to strip away personal existence view, which you haven't learned yet. It's in chapter 16. And when we get to that, I'm going to teach you multiple proactive techniques that you can be using to knock down your personal existence view. But those things aren't going to be effective if you don't first have the Eightfold Path well underway. So that's why here at the beginning of the program, I really focus on getting the foundational teachings well understood and help you to get them in practice. So you have a number of months before we get to chapter 16. That's 13 weeks away. So if I were you, I would focus on the Eightfold Path first, really get that well rooted and in place. And then when we get to chapter 16, I'm going to help you to understand how you can go to work and look presentable and you can look just fine, but then you'll learn how to eliminate the mind forming its inner feelings based on some condition. That's what you're eliminating. Looks like Rodam has a question. Sorry if I mispronounced your name.
No, it's great. Rotem, yes, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for the interesting lesson. I'm happy to join again after a long break. I have several questions. The first one is regarding the personal existence view. So I'm thinking to myself, is anything that I'm doing dye my hair or try to lose weight or Botox even? So is any of these things that are meant to improve how I look necessarily will be against this rule?
It's not a rule, and it's not about anything that is against it. What it is helping you to see how your mind's clinging to these things and then forming your inner feelings based on them. So if there's a wrinkle, I feel sad or I feel like less of a person. But if I put some Botox in there, now there's no wrinkle and I feel happy again. But this body is not permanent. You are going to have wrinkles, right? You're not going to be able to go through your entire life with no wrinkles, for example, right? So if the mind continues to form its inner feelings based on the appearance of this body, when the mind is experiencing impermanence related to this body, it will then experience discontentedness. So the things that you're talking about are rooted in personal existence view, and the mind needs to be able to understand how to be comfortable without these things. But when you choose to approach that is a decision for you to make, and you're going to need to have some more training to be able to get to the point where you're comfortable to understand, like, yeah, this body's going to have wrinkles. Yeah, it's going to have extra weight sometimes. It's going to have gray hair. This is all normal, and I don't have to form my feelings based on this. So there's certain things that you guys are going to hear in chapter 16. So, for example, let's just take one thing, like since you mentioned dyeing your hair. If somebody was dyeing their hair and they didn't feel comfortable with gray hair, what I would suggest that they do is after they get the Eightfold Path and everything well underway, is I would suggest they let their hair go gray. And now, as it's showing gray for multiple weeks and months, they're going to feel uncomfortable at first, but then over time, the mind's going to become more and more peaceful and more comfortable going out into the world with this gray hair. And now, let's just say it's been 6 months or a year, however long it's been, and you're completely content going out into the world with gray hair. And there's no issue with that whatsoever. And now let's just say it's been a while and you decide, you know what, I'd like to just dye my hair because I just like it better and I prefer that it's dyed. But you know that your mind's completely content and peaceful with this gray hair because you've had it for 6 months or a year or what have you. And now you might just decide to start dyeing your hair because you just prefer to have colored hair. But you can be perfectly content with colored hair or gray hair. And now you know that that aspect of personal existence view has been eradicated from the mind, that you're completely comfortable with the impermanent nature of this hair. So there's these types of things and others that you would need to do in order to shed this away. So it's not about like a rule or a commandment or going against something. It's about training the mind to be comfortable with the impermanent nature of this physical body or any kind of identity that the mind's clinging to.
Yeah, it sounds like a hard thing to do. I hope I'll get there one day.
Yeah, so
I have a question. That I wanted to hear your opinion about.
Sure.
You talked about the doubt, and I feel like I still, I don't know if it's not like a question. I feel like still I have a doubt. Like, should I give up the happy feelings I have? You mentioned being excited because I'm going to a trip. So I think that I just feel this doubt in me about giving up those feelings, like the good feelings. And I know that if I have those good feelings and it's conditioned by something, so I might feel bad after if I'm not going to get the thing I'm excited about or so. But I don't know, I just feel like still I have a doubt, like, should I live without any feeling, if it makes sense?
Sure. So,
and I'm also trying to speak well, and my English is not that great, so I'm not sure that I clarify my point.
Yeah, you were very clear. First, let me talk about something that you talked about at the beginning, and this is connected to Julie's question too, where people will oftentimes hear what I'm teaching about enlightenment and they're like, oh, this sounds so hard. It sounds so difficult. Well, that's just because the mind doesn't have the wisdom of how to do it. The mind's so used to having personal existence view, or the mind's so used to having certain things that it can't imagine life without this, right? It can't imagine going outside with gray hair, for example, or it can't imagine, having a wrinkle or a pimple and being completely comfortable with that because the mind doesn't know anything different than that. So all of these teachings that the Buddha is sharing, yeah, it's challenging. An individual is going to need to strive to be able to get to this. It's not a 1 week or 1 month or even 1 year type of thing. It's going to be multiple years to get to enlightenment. But the difference is that this is a permanent solution. That by the time you get to enlightenment, your mind's permanently peaceful and joyful. You've done what you had to do. You cultivated the wisdom, you've trained the mind, you've overcome all these challenges. But sitting at the beginning, it can sound pretty significant. Like if you were going to hike a mountain and you were at the bottom of the mountain, it's like, wow, that mountain is really tall. I don't know if I'm ever going to get to the top. But if you just start walking and focus on one step at a time, next thing you know, you're halfway up the mountain and you're like, wow, this isn't a real big issue after all. I can make my way up this mountain, no big deal. So when you hear me describe these things and what an individual is working towards, it's going to sound very challenging. And that's just because the mind lacks wisdom of how to do it. But when you start chipping away at this, you can see that it actually is pretty straightforward. It's just that you need the wisdom of how to do it. So in terms of your doubt about eliminating conditioned pleasant feelings, yes, this is something that a lot of people have because they don't understand that conditioned pleasant feelings are conditional, meaning you can only be happy if certain things are occurring. And if those things aren't occurring, your mind is experiencing painful feelings, the anger, sadness, frustration, and others. You will never eliminate your painful feelings until you eliminate the conditional pleasant feelings. But it's important to understand that you're going to be now beyond these conditional feelings by the time you get to enlightenment. You're going to be experiencing unconditioned happiness, unconditioned joy, where you can just be joyful all the time. It doesn't matter what's happening. Where in the unenlightened state, you can only be happy if certain criteria are met. So that means your happiness shrinks because all those conditions can't be met permanently. This is why people are very sometimes old and grumpy, because they have all these expectations of what they want from the world, and they have so many expectations, they're old and grumpy. If you think back to when we were children, we were so happy as a child because we didn't have any expectations. We didn't have all these cravings, desires, attachments circulating in our mind. So we were so happy all the time. But as we age, your mind picks up all these cravings and expectations, and now your happiness shrinks. So what you're getting rid of is the temporary happiness. And you need to be willing to let go of the temporary happiness in order to get to the permanent happiness. So you're actually giving up something that is undesirable and unsatisfactory, and you're moving to something that is completely fulfilling and satisfying, that your mind will be bright and cheerful and uplifted all the time because it's unconditional. There doesn't need to be any condition met for the mind to be experiencing this happiness.
This makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, it looks like Ted and or Kristen have a question.
David, you kind of answered it. Good evening. We just booked our trip to Thailand for January, and look forward to seeing you. Mm-hmm. And look forward to getting enlightened when I arrive in Thailand. Only kidding. It's hard not to put a lot of eggs in one basket and say, okay, I'm planning this trip. It's bringing me happiness. It's conditional. I understand that. I don't necessarily know how to look at the trip. I don't know how to look at it if I'm not looking at it conditionally. And now it's becoming very clear how I put conditions on my moods. Mm-hmm. So I don't necessarily know if that's a question. It's something I look forward to. Mm-hmm. I'm not spiking with happiness or bouncing off the walls, but it would definitely be a bummer if it didn't happen. Yep. So there's a condition, Mm-hmm.
Yeah, what you would like to get to is that, yeah, I'm looking forward to the trip. It's going to be really fun. And that's the direction that I'm headed in, to be able to have this trip. But you know what? If it doesn't happen, that's okay too, right? That's what you would like to be able to get to. And that's not where you're at right now. And that's okay, right? But that's what you'd ultimately like to get to. Because as long as you allow the mind to get excited about the trip, if it doesn't happen for whatever reason, let's just say there's another COVID type thing and the planes aren't traveling for 3 years, Well, there you go. People were very discontent, during that time frame when they weren't able to travel. So what you would like to do is, with your mindfulness, your awareness of mind, whenever the conditioned pleasant feelings are arising, you would like to catch it and cut it off and let it go. Right? That's where you need to have enough mindfulness develop that you can see the conditioned pleasant feelings as a bodily sensation. And you can cut it off and let it go, and cut it off and let it go, and cut it off and let it go. And it's going to take multiple times to be able to do that. And then eventually, you'll be able to be happy no matter what. Because Rotem mentioned this too about going on a trip and being excited. Well, if we can only be excited when we go on a trip, then that means when something like COVID happens and everybody's sitting in their home for 3 years, well, people are pretty discontent. There's probably a lot of divorces, I'd imagine, during that time frame or shortly afterwards, right? Because people were very discontent in that situation. Where what you would like to be able to do is get to the point where you're completely happy and joyful and fulfilled no matter what you're doing. And you won't be able to do that if you allow the mind to keep getting conditioned pleasant feelings. So whenever you see the mind getting conditioned pleasant feelings, cut that off and let it go. And then over time, your mind will not form the conditioned pleasant feelings. So therefore, when that particular thing isn't happening, for example, you're not going on the trip for some reason, you can be completely peaceful and joyful there too. But that's what you're working towards, and you're not going to be able to just do it at the snap of a finger. It's going to take gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress to get there.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, let me see if we have any questions anywhere else. And I don't see any questions anywhere else. Okay, so let's go to the higher fetters. I'm going to talk about 6 and 7 together because these are very similar. There's desire for form and desire for formless. This is where the mind has a craving to exist in the world and be part of one of these realms. Whether it's the animal realm and human realm, that's the desire for form. And we call it that because there's physical form. The animals and human beings have physical form, where an individual might crave to exist in this world, right? Where like maybe you might think, oh, it'd be so cool to be a bird. I'd like to just kind of fly around the world and look at the world from the height of a bird. Wow, that would be so amazing. Or maybe you're craving to be in this life, right? Craving permanent life. Right? Well, if you're experiencing that, when you get close to death, you're going to have a lot of painful feelings because we all are going to die. Every single one of us. We're impermanent. We can't escape that. So as long as there's desire for form and to exist in this world, you can't be permanently peaceful and joyful because when you get close to death, you're going to be having painful feelings. And you might even have fear of death. But by the time you get to the elimination of the desire of form, you won't have the fear of death any longer. Or some people have desire for formless. They would like to exist in the hell realm, the afflicted spirit realm, like the ghost, or the heavenly realm. That's the more popular one that people have a longing yearning to exist in heaven. But there are beings who have a craving to exist in hell or the afflicted spirit realm. So if you've been taught that these realms are permanent and that there's some being who's overseeing you and sending you to one of these places and it's a permanent existence, and that heaven is this grand place that you should aspire for, well, you're going to be very disappointed when you find out that these realms are not permanent. You can see in the world around you that these things aren't permanent. So if your mind craves and longs and yearns to be in the heavenly realm permanently, for example, well, you can't be peaceful and joyful in the present moment because your mind is longing, yearning for this existence in the heavenly realm. What the Buddha is guiding you towards is complete peace and joy, contentedness, full satisfaction and fulfillment, living the ideal life now in this existence. Whereas if you have a desire to exist in some other realm, then your mind isn't content in the present moment. You're longing, yearning for something else. So by the time you get to enlightenment, you will have eliminated desire for form and desire for formless, where you're not longing, yearning to exist in this world, but you're also not longing, yearning for non-existence either. Non-existence would be like being interested to kill yourself, right? You're not going to be on either side of this. Your mind's going to be in the middle where you're completely content and peaceful in the present moment. Where sometimes people live a certain life and they need to take a vacation from that life, right? They're working, they have a certain place where they live, and they go on vacation and they feel really great when they're on vacation. But then when it's time to go back to their life, It's like, oh my goodness, I don't want to go back, right? Well, that life is a life that you've created. Where you work, your friends, where you live, all these different things are the decisions that you've made, right? But if we don't have a life that we thoroughly enjoy, then it'll feel like a real drag to live that life. So the Buddha is helping you to get to the point where you don't have desire for existence, but you don't have a desire for non-existence either, but you've created this ideal life for yourself where you're fully fulfilled and satisfied in the present moment. But as long as you have desire to continue to exist, a longing, a yearning, then your mind can't be content and peaceful in the present moment. Then there's conceit. This is the measuring and comparing, being arrogant and prideful, judging other people, thinking that you're superior or inferior to other beings. This is oftentimes associated with the ego. This is part of the ego, but it's not the entire ego. Personal existence view is also part of the ego. We're going to talk about this in chapter 16. With conceit, the mind's going to potentially go to like a social situation, and you're going to be measuring and comparing where you fit in amongst all these people. And now the people that you think are below you, you're going to talk down to them. And then the people you think that are above you, you're going to talk up to them, and your mind's going to be shaken up when you're around them. So, for example, if you've gone into your boss's office and you were uncalm and shaken up by that, that's your conceit, because you're putting yourself below your boss. You think that they're above you, and now you can't communicate effectively when you're spending time with this person, and you're not going to have the professional success that you could otherwise have. But in other situations, you're putting yourself above people, looking down on them. And now when you're in a mixed group of company, you're talking down to some people and up to other people. And the people you're talking down to, they don't really appreciate that, and they're going to push you aside. And the people you're talking up to, they can see through that, and your mind's all shaken up, and you're going to lack confidence in those situations. And your mind's having to constantly figure out, and it's overburdened with figuring out who's above me and who's below me. And now you're having to switch how you interact with people in these various situations. But what you would like to get to is where you just treat everybody equally, where maybe other people have conceit and they look at themselves as either being above you or below you, but your mind, you think of everybody as equal. So like here in Thailand, if you saw someone sweeping the streets, you would be polite, kind, friendly, respectful. Hello, sir. Hello, ma'am. Good morning. How are you? But if you saw the king of Thailand walking down the street, which you're probably not going to see, but if you did, you could say, hello, sir, how are you, right? Or you saw the queen of Thailand. Hello, ma'am, how are you doing? You treat everybody the same, right? And if you are able to eliminate this conceit, that's what you'll be able to get to. And now you can be confident in each individual situation. Where this conceit is coming from is our animal existences. That in our animal existences, we needed a pecking order. We needed to know who was above us and who was below us. Because if we didn't know that, we wouldn't have survived. As a herd of elephants, we needed to know who's the matriarch of our herd. Because she's going to show us where the food is, where the migration paths are, where the watering holes are. And if we didn't know who the matriarch of our herd was, we'd be roaming in the jungle clueless about these things, and we wouldn't have been able to survive. So we needed this pecking order. We needed this conceit. But in the human realm, we don't actually need this. And it just gets in the way of having love and kindness for all beings and having harmonious relationships. Then there's restlessness. This is where the mind is overactive and confused. It's distracted. This is where you might have worry or a restless state of mind. If you've ever been in a situation where you've like tapped your finger over and over and over again, or you tapped a pencil or a pen, or you're bobbing your knee up and down and up and down, this is because your mind is overactive with restlessness, and it's coming through the body, and the body is also overactive. So this is something that needs to be eliminated from the mind. Then there's the fetter of all fetters, which is ignorance. This is the unknowing of true reality, the lack of wisdom, that the mind just doesn't understand what it doesn't understand. For example, the mind doesn't understand that it's causing its own discontentedness, that it's craving, desire, attachment that's causing this. It's not the outside world, but we go around firmly believing that because of our ignorance. The way that ignorance gets eradicated is through first intellectually learning and examining the teachings, then reflecting on them to independently verify if they're true or false, Then you practice the teachings, integrating them into your day-to-day life, and that's where the real transformation is happening. So if you understood something intellectually, your ignorance isn't eliminated yet. Because, for example, as we were growing up, we learned that drugs and alcohol were unwise. We knew that intellectually, but we still did it. That's because of our ignorance, right? So when we have ignorance, we're not going to be making wise decisions. We might intellectually know something, but we're not making decisions based in that wisdom. So to eradicate ignorance, there's an intellectual aspect to it, but then there's the actual practice. And you're going to need to cultivate wisdom about all these different teachings. And these are all teachings that I share: the universal truths, the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, the Five Precepts, the natural law of Dhamma, the cycle of rebirth. All of these things are things that you will learn over time. And then you'll need to practice making decisions based on the wisdom that you've cultivated to be able to see the truth. So while we refer to it as attaining enlightenment, it's not an instantaneous thing. It's gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress. And while we call it attaining enlightenment, one of the ways you might think about it is that the mind is already enlightened. But you've got these pollutions that are in the way, and you've got to get that pollution out of the way. It's kind of like the sun is there, but the clouds are blocking it. And when the clouds peel away, the sun can shine through, and the rays of the sun shine through more and more as you get the clouds out of the way. So it's the same thing, that as you're gradually eliminating these pollutions and they're starting to be removed from the mind, the qualities of enlightenment start to shine through more and more and more. And that's where you start to be able to experience these glimpses of what enlightenment is like, where you can experience a minute or two, or an hour or two, or multiple days or weeks, or even months at a certain point, where your mind's quite peaceful and joyful. But because there's still pollution, the mind will experience some discontentedness. So you can think of it as attaining enlightenment, or you could think about it as the mind's already enlightened and you just got to get this pollution out of the mind. And it's your wisdom that's going to help you to be able to do that. You need wisdom in order to understand things like the 10 fetters and understanding what they are and all the other teachings. And you do that through learning, examining, and investigating, through reflecting to independently verify, and through practicing, integrating it into your day-to-day life and transforming the way that you make decisions in your day-to-day life. So let me know what questions you guys have here, and then I'm going to share with you some other things as part of our class today. Okay, I don't see any questions anywhere. All right, so now what I'll share with you is the 4 stages of enlightenment. And as I mentioned, some of you guys have already studied this recently. There's 4 stages: stream enterer, once returner, non-returner, and arahant. Today, we might just call them the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th stage of enlightenment, but during the lifetime of the Buddha, they refer to them in this way. He referred to the 1st stage of enlightenment as a stream enterer, because once a log enters the stream, it's going to eventually get to the ocean. It's only a matter of time. And the same thing is true for someone who gets to the 1st stage of enlightenment, that once somebody gets to this 1st stage of enlightenment, it's only a matter of time before they get to enlightenment. And then a once returner is that if somebody dies in the 2nd stage of enlightenment and they come back, they will come back to this human world one more time and get to enlightenment there. In the 3rd stage of enlightenment, if someone dies there, they are a non-returner. They actually are reborn into the heavenly realm and they get to enlightenment from there. But if someone completely purifies their mind, the Buddha referred to this person as an arahant. This was a word that was in use during his lifetime, where today we might just refer to this person as an enlightened being because they've completely purified their mind. And then there's something called a Buddha. That's not a stage of enlightenment, but it's a unique and rare individual. The last Buddha that the world's currently aware of existed over 2,500 years ago. So the way to get to this 1st stage of enlightenment is to put together all the Eightfold Path as a starting point. And you practice that for many months. And now your mind is going to slowly over time, over multiple months and years, start moving into those jhanas, those preliminary phases that the mind experiences enhanced qualities. Then you start focusing on eliminating the 10 fetters. And now, as you eliminate personal existence view, doubts, and wrong behavior and observances, your mind will move into this first stage of enlightenment. And from there, your discontentedness will be significantly diminished. Whatever your discontentedness was when you were off the path to enlightenment to when you're in the first stage of enlightenment, it'll just be a mere fraction of what it once was. Then, as you have done that, the mind will then further start to thin out number 4 and 5, where you've already eliminated personal existence view, doubt, and wrong behavior and observances, but central desire and ill will starts to be thinned out. And this is a once returner. So if you're noticing maybe that you're not as interested in sex, or you're not as angry and hostile and bitter as you once were, this is a slow, gradual thinning of central desire and ill will. But when you greatly thin this is where the mind will move into the second stage of enlightenment. And once again, the discontentedness has significantly been reduced at this point. Then there's the third stage of enlightenment, where somebody has eliminated the 5 lower fetters. This individual is called a non-returner, or the third stage of enlightenment. They're experiencing discontentedness like once every 2 months, once every 3 months, once every 6 months. It's very infrequent, and it's very insignificant when it's occurring. It might last for 30 seconds, and then it's gone, and it's done. And in this stage of enlightenment, people can sometimes experience complacency because you're experiencing discontentedness so infrequently and it's so insignificant that the mind just almost isn't even interested in paying attention to it, because at this point the mind just kind of cuts it off, and it's almost so easy that the mind doesn't even pay attention to it so much. So you need to stay diligent and dedicated and determined in this third stage of enlightenment so that your mind doesn't become complacent and you eradicate all the pollutions that are causing the discontentedness. So once you move into this fourth stage of enlightenment, that's where the mind's actually enlightened, where it's been completely purified of all the 10 fetters, and now there's no discontentedness whatsoever. It will be 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. There's no discontentedness in the mind at all. And you'll know that your mind is enlightened at this point. Okay? Then there's something called a Buddha. A Buddha is an individual who's gotten to enlightenment. They've purified their mind of the 10 fetters. They are an arahant, or an enlightened being. But they've done so in a unique way that designates them as a Buddha, or a fully, perfectly enlightened one. The first criteria of a Buddha is that they get to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides. They then dedicate the rest of their life to sharing their independently discovered teachings with countless people, and countless people will get to enlightenment during that person's lifetime. Then they will preserve their teachings in such a way that countless more people will get to enlightenment after their death. These are the 3 primary criteria of what make a Buddha a Buddha. They get to enlightenment by themselves. They then dedicate the rest of their life to sharing their independently discovered teachings, and countless people will get to enlightenment. Then they preserve their teachings in such a way that countless more people will get to enlightenment after their death. What allows them to get to enlightenment by themselves is this 4th criteria, that they have a profound memory to remember countless details about their current life and their past lives too. They bring together all that wisdom to apply it to be able to get to enlightenment in this life without the help of any teachers or any guides. So the average person, they have a limited capacity in their mind. It's like a hard drive, 500 gigabytes, a terabyte, where in the last 5 or 10 years or so, you can remember pretty much what you've been up to. But if you think back to your childhood, you just have spotty memories because you've had to delete those files in order to store new files because you have a limited capacity. But an individual who's a Buddha or is going to become a Buddha, even in the unenlightened state, they have a profound memory that they can remember countless details about their current life and their past lives too. And now they put together all that wisdom to be able to help them to get to enlightenment in their last life. Then they can also quickly determine the condition of someone's mind by just spending time with that person. They can observe the 10 fetters in somebody else's mind and then offer that person teachings to be able to help them to be able to overcome that. They would only do that with a student. They wouldn't just give unsolicited guidance to somebody without this individual having asked for this guidance or becoming a student. So they wouldn't just go around and just start telling everybody about their pollutions in their mind. They're going to actually ensure that they're giving guidance to people who are requesting it. And then an individual who's a Buddha will be a living, breathing, walking example of their teachings. Whatever they're teaching, they're also practicing that too. So they're teaching just as much through their spoken words as they are through their actions. A Buddha understands that their students are observing their bodily actions and how they interact in the world through their speech and their actions and the way they conduct themselves, and that their students are learning from that. So they're going to be practicing the exact same things that they're teaching. They're a living, breathing, walking example of their teachings. And this is called a fully, perfectly enlightened Buddha, because by the time this individual gets to enlightenment, what they know about the path to enlightenment is the path to enlightenment. They don't have any extra baggage. A student who has learned from a teacher, and the teacher is not a Buddha, this individual might have gotten to enlightenment, but they still have like maybe 10%, 20% of extra baggage around, of things that didn't actually lead to their enlightenment, but they're still actually doing those things. So this individual is not fully perfectly enlightened, but by the time an individual gets to enlightenment as a Buddha, they don't have any teachers. If they try a certain meditation and it works to improve the condition of their mind, they know that that's part of the path to enlightenment. If they try a certain meditation and it's not improving the condition of their mind, they will discard it because they know that it's not part of the path to enlightenment. So this is why we refer to them as a fully, perfectly enlightened one, because what they know about the path to enlightenment is exactly the path. And then they spend the rest of their life illuminating that path and making it available for everybody to be able to know exactly what it takes to be able to get to enlightenment. So this person is called a fully, perfectly enlightened one. And this is a very rare type of individual in the world. The last one that the world is currently aware of existed over 2,500 years ago. Now there's people today that will tell you that everybody is a Buddha, or they will say you have Buddhahood or you have Buddha nature. But this isn't what the Buddha taught. This is people's conceit and their lack of wisdom, not knowing what an actual Buddha is. So now you know what a Buddha is. Just like I teach what something is, I also teach what something is not. And this will help you to understand what something is. So now I'm going to share with you a couple of things to know that the mind is not enlightened. And then that'll help you to understand what enlightenment is. So if you experience conditioned feelings, remember conditioned feelings, based on some condition, you're going to experience happiness or excitement or sadness or anger or shyness or pleasant, painful, or neither painful nor pleasant feelings, you know the mind is not enlightened. Now remember, an enlightened being is beyond the conditionality of the happiness. They're just always happy. They're always cheerful. They're always glad. They're enjoying everything. But in the unenlightened state, you can only be happy when certain things are happening. So in an unenlightened state, this individual is going to experience conditioned feelings. Based on some condition, they're going to experience some feeling. An unenlightened being might have a craving, desire, attachment to tell everybody that they're actually enlightened. You might see this if you're out in the world, if you go to retreats. I've heard stories about this from people. Someone might just roll up to you and kind of whisper in your ear, kind of look around and say, hey, don't tell anybody. Like, this is a secret between you and I. I'm enlightened. Right? And they might kind of share with you like this. This is their boastfulness. This is their arrogance. This is their pride. They have a desire, a craving. What they want, they maybe want admiration or respect from you, right? So this individual isn't enlightened yet. They might think they're enlightened, but they're not. Because an enlightened being's mind is so peaceful and joyful, they don't need to go around and tell people that their mind is enlightened. They don't need to brag or boast to other people and tell other people these things. Just go be peaceful. Just go be joyful, right? You don't need to go around telling everybody. So if you have a desire to tell people that you are enlightened, then you know that your mind is not enlightened. If you notice that there's complacency, where there's a lack of motivation, initiative, enthusiasm, or a willingness to do something, then you know your mind is not enlightened. Because that's what the unenlightened mind will do. With craving, desire, attachment, it will chase. I want more money. I want a bigger house. I want a nicer car. I want a better job. I want this. I want that. I want that. It'll chase. And when it's not doing that, it'll swing all the way to the other side and it'll be exhausted. it'll be tired. You'll be dull and lethargic, right? The enlightened mind is in the middle. It's bright, it's uplifted, it's cheerful. That you don't experience exhaustion and tiredness in the enlightened mental state. You'll get to the end of your day as an unenlightened being and you'll be like, this was a horrible day. It was so hectic, right? And you'll be exhausted. Or you'll get to the end of your day and you'll be like, wow, this was the best day ever. Wow. That's because all your cravings were getting fulfilled, right? But by the time you get to enlightenment, you're not going to have that swinging back and forth. It's just every day is a wonderful day. You'll just enjoy every single aspect of your day. So if you're noticing this complacency coming into the mind, then you'll know that your mind is not yet enlightened. So this is everything that I'm going to share with you guys today. And then I'm just going to open up to any questions that you guys might have related to what I've been sharing. So feel free to put those into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or raise your hand in Zoom and ask any and all questions that you like. So it looks like Paul has his hand up. So go ahead, Paul.
Hi, David. My question's regarding the Buddha. And you were saying that Buddha is somebody who attains enlightenment without the help of a teacher or guides. Is the guide, would the writings of the Buddha, the books there that exist, is that what you would consider a guide?
No, that is just resources and materials. An individual who's not a Buddha wouldn't be able to read books and just get to enlightenment. And a Buddha wouldn't actually need to have those kinds of things. So an individual who's a Buddha today, they would maybe look at what is being taught and what is in the books, but the books have been in such disarray in the past that that individual who is even a Buddha or who is going to become a Buddha wouldn't actually be able to get to enlightenment just purely through the books alone, because it's been 2,500 years that these teachings have been in place and they've really deteriorated over time. So an individual who is going to be a Buddha, they would be able to get to enlightenment on their own without the help of any teachers or guides, any actual living, breathing person. They would be able to do it on their own. But they would today, for example, a Buddha would need to look at what's being taught in order to help people understand and clarify what it is that the Buddha taught. So when we talk about guides, we're talking about a living, breathing teacher.
So a person who becomes a Buddha is someone who attains enlightenment, but could be building on a previous Buddha whose body of work exists, and that has helped that Buddha to become a Buddha. The Buddha that we're referring to 2,500 years ago, he didn't have these writings, so he became a Buddha without even that as a starting point. Today, if a Buddha exists, they would be aware of and make use of the previous Buddha's writings, and that would make him the same as the first Buddha or something lesser than the first Buddha.
Two Buddhas aren't going to measure and compare themselves of who is a higher Buddha or who is a lower Buddha. They're both Buddhas, right? So you're right. The Gotama Buddha, the Buddha, he didn't have any writings or anything. He just figured it out on his own mind. A Buddha that would exist today, the teachings that they share that are going to help people get to enlightenment, they're exactly the same teachings from 2,500 years ago that Gotama Buddha shared. But the resources in the books are not 100% reflective of what that Buddha taught. So the Pali Canon, as it sits today, the other versions, not the version that I use, but the other versions, they're in disarray. They're using all kinds of vocabulary that doesn't even match up to what an enlightened being needs to be able to learn and practice. For example, the word suffering is being used a lot. Or sometimes you'll see translations that unenlightened translators are referring to the Buddha as having said things like, "You stupid fool," right? A Buddha doesn't speak this way. But an unenlightened being who is translating the words of a fully perfectly enlightened Buddha, thinking that that's how they speak, they think that a Buddha speaks that way too. So they're translating his words in a way that isn't actually reflective of how a Buddha speaks. So the books and resources that exist in the world today, prior to 2017, 2018, they were in disarray. And any new Buddha that comes into the world today would be aware of those teachings, but they wouldn't lead to enlightenment as they are. That individual would need to update these resources to be reflective of how a enlightened being actually thinks and the wisdom that they would have in order to be able to get to enlightenment. But it would be the same teachings. It would just be now it would just now be updated with new analogies, new content, but in terms of the teachings themselves, they're the same natural laws.
So as you have done, you have read the Pali Canon and you have updated it and converted it into a form that is understandable to people today.
That's what a Buddha today would need to be able to do, yes.
So I won't ask you if you're a Buddha.
Thank you.
Because you can't answer that anyhow. Okay, thank you, David.
You're welcome. Okay, Ted and Kristen.
Hi, Teacher David. My question is about this sensation of fear. And does that get eliminated as you sort of go along the path? And it's specifically a fear of like your safety. So say you're sort of confronted with a situation and will that sort of just be eliminated? Will you not have any fear at all? Yeah, I guess that's my question.
An individual who's gotten to enlightenment, they won't have any fear whatsoever, but it doesn't get eliminated automatically. It gets eliminated through very specific things like elimination of sensual desire, for example, elimination of desire for form and formless, elimination of personal existence view, things like this. So by purifying the mind of those 10 fetters, that individual won't have any fear, but it needs to come through intentional work to eradicate the fetters. It wouldn't happen through just kind of like happenstance. In fact, by the time we get to chapter 17, I'm going to teach very specific teachings of how to eliminate all fears from the mind. But essentially what you're doing is eliminating sensual desire in those other fetters as well, and that's what will eliminate the fear.
Okay, so like this morning I went on a walk and I was in the path of a bobcat, and immediately I didn't have any fear at all. I was like, okay, there is this being and I'm not causing harm to him. It won't cause harm to me. And so I just kind of just decided to change routes and go in a different direction. But then there was this moment where my mind experienced the idea of what would happen if this animal attacked me, and what that looked like. And then I got this sensation of fear that like went through my whole body for a brief moment. And then it went away. It sort of dissipated as I continued my walk. But I noticed it clearly, that feeling, that sensation of fear. And I was like, I wonder when and how that sort of happens. And so that was just a question about that.
That's the mind's desire for form, holding on to this existence, clinging to it. And in those situations, your mind's being confronted with that and you're having to cut that off. And that's what you would like to do. So you saw how you have the capability to reside peaceful and calm in that situation. But then later, when the mind thought about it, that's when the desire for form arose, and that's where the fear arose. So when that's occurring in the future, you were talking about seeing it in the body, that's where you'd like to cut it off. And then over time, as you have each one of these experiences, your mind will become more and more peaceful and more joyful. So I'm sure you're not looking forward to seeing a bobcat again, perhaps, but there's the potential that or something else might occur, like a snake or who knows what. And that's where you just do the same thing that you did initially. Like, I'm not causing harm to the bobcat. The bobcat's not going to cause harm to me. I'm just going to go this other way and give that being its space. And that is a wise choice that you're making. And now you can just reside peaceful and joyful in knowing that there doesn't need to be fear in the mind, and you can completely go on with your day.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, it looks like Kim has a question. Go ahead, ma'am.
Hi, David. I have two questions. One that I placed, but I can ask it now. Do the lower fetters need to be eliminated before proceeding to eliminating the higher fetters?
Not necessarily. These fetters are laid out in this way as a kind of personal growth plan and a development plan. Because, for example, you wouldn't be able to eliminate your conceit, which is fetter 8, until you've eliminated number 1, personal existence view, right? So they are kind of a gradual progression of how the mind will generally, progress. But it doesn't mean you have to wait until one fetter is eliminated before you start working on the other one. So, for example, conceit is one that oftentimes takes several years to eliminate. So you guys can be working on that right now. Whenever you see the mind judging somebody else or trying to measure and compare, you can cut that off and say, no, I'm not going to allow the mind to do that. So you'll notice that sometimes certain ones will be eliminated, like desire for form and desire for formless. Sometimes people have already eliminated that before they've even eliminated personal existence view or anything else. So one like restlessness, you wouldn't be able to eliminate restlessness, which is a higher fetter, until you eliminate central desire. But you're working on all of these essentially at the same time, particularly when you're practicing the Eightfold Path. They're all working in the same direction. But there does become a point in time where you work with each one of them individually as you learn what the symptoms are and how to eliminate them individually. But you're really kind of working on all of them at the same time.
Thank you. My other question, in the chapter, you list some of the physical and emotional symptoms that are attributed to awakening of the mind to enlightenment. And one of the emotional ones you list is that you'll no longer have dreams or can't remember your dreams. What about the opposite of that almost? What if you're starting to remember things from the past that haven't been in your mind for years and years and years? Is that maybe the mind waking up?
Yes. So those things that I listed there, those are like possible things, and not everybody experiences all of those. But there's also other things too, like what you just described. Like sometimes people can go a long period of time without any dreams, or sometimes after that, sometimes people can start dreaming again and having vivid dreams. And part of what they dream about is, like you said, about things long in the past. What is happening there is that in the past, we've had certain events and certain situations happen. And at that time, we didn't have any wisdom about the path to enlightenment. So we typically bury those things. And then we just start stacking kind of trash and garbage on top of it. And now as you're going through the path to enlightenment and you start shedding some of that pollution, some of those old memories can start bubbling up to the surface, not just in dreams, but in day-to-day life too. This is very common. It's almost like taking the Band-Aid off in the scab, and now all of a sudden you've got these things from the past coming up to the surface of your mind. But now the difference is that you have the tools and techniques of how to deal with those things, so you don't just suppress them and bury them, but you clear it out of the mind 100%. Because we thought that those things were gone and out of the mind, and we didn't realize that they were buried in there all that time. And that was part of what's motivating these discontent feelings and the lack of concentration and the struggles that we experience in day-to-day life. So as this stuff is bubbling up, you would like to just clear it out of the mind. And that's going to help to purify the mind and get it to the point where it's more stable and steady and more peaceful and joyful, because you don't have this stuff buried inside the mind anymore.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, we have a question coming in from Julie. My understanding is we need to train our mind mood in the middle, not too excited and happy so we don't get too sad or disappointed. Is that right? Yes, but by the time you get to enlightenment, it's not about not getting too sad or disappointed. You won't get sad or disappointed at all. And it's not about getting too excited or happy. It's about not getting to conditional excitement, conditional happiness, getting to the point where you can just be happy all the time, right? And that's where it's just so easy to smile and be joyful and bright and uplifted. So it's not about being too much. That's what you're experiencing when you're in the jhanas, that it kind of comes down and narrows, but you're still experiencing conditional feelings. But by the time you get to enlightenment, you're not experiencing any of those conditioned feelings. So that's helpful for you there, Julie. Julie also asked, Teacher David, how to remove restlessness from the mind, or that is something you will teach later on. So first, you would like to focus on the elimination of central desire. In order to do that, you need to first understand the Eightfold Path. So what I encourage all of you guys to do is memorize the Eightfold Path. You need to commit this to your memory. And that's why I've taught it already in this program. And then in the next 2 weeks, I'm going to teach it again. chapter 4 and chapter 5 is the Eightfold Path, because you need to commit this to your memory, and you're going to need to learn it more than one time in order to be able to get the results and benefits on the path to enlightenment. So eliminating restlessness, you need to first eliminate central desire, but you need to practice the Eightfold Path to eliminate central desire. So you need to start there first. But don't worry, you'll be able to eliminate restlessness by the time you get there. And Kim, I see your question there, so it looks like I already answered that for you. And you're welcome, Julie. Pleased to help you. Okay, it looks like Paul might have another question.
Yes, David. Wondering, can an enlightened being exist in the world that in a conflicted zone of the world, like where there's war and death? I mean, how can they exist there, or do they have to leave because they can't maintain their joy when surrounded by death and destruction?
No, an enlightened being can be peaceful and joyful no matter where they are. But they would make wise decisions. In my opinion, an enlightened being would leave a war zone, that they understand that this is unwise to be here, and they would find a way to leave. So they could still maintain their peace and joy, though, but they wouldn't exist in a war zone because they know how unwise that would be.
In spite of the fact that they may have, their roots are there, their family, their whole world has revolved around that zone that is now in conflict, they would, in order to maintain their enlightenment, they would migrate away from there. They couldn't exist there because it would just be too hard to be joyful in that situation.
No, not at all. There's nothing that an enlightened being needs to do to maintain their enlightened mental state. So it's not that they're unjoyful, so therefore they have to leave, because it's not the outside world that's creating the joy. So an enlightened being who live, let's just say here in Thailand, if I live in Chiang Mai, if all of a sudden Laos or Cambodia started bombing Chiang Mai, I'm not tied to this place. I'm not clinging to it. It's the home that I live in, but I'm not clinging to it. I get on an airplane, I get on a boat, I'd use my feet, I'd use a bicycle, a motorbike, a car, I would get out of here, right? Because I'm not clinging to it. But while I'm doing it, I'm making wise decisions, and I'm still joyful and peaceful as I'm traveling. It's just that you're making a wise decision to leave this place behind, and now you understand that this is an impermanent situation. Chiang Mai is getting bombed by Cambodia, but this isn't permanent. I can leave for a few months or a few years, and then I can come back at some future date, and I can resume life here in Chiang Mai. But that time that you're away, you would still be peaceful and joyful. In the time that you're here, you would still be peaceful and joyful. There's nothing that you need to do in order to maintain that peace and joy.
That is hard for an unenlightened person such as myself to understand. It's really to imagine that you could run away from a war zone, let's say, because you can't walk away because you're being threatened from bombing and bullets and so on. And you could maintain joy as you're running away from this conflict. It's hard for us unenlightened beings to imagine. Like, it's a lot easier to imagine it when it's a peaceful, normal, like Chiang Mai is today. That's a lot easier to imagine than it is in that scenario that I gave.
Well, I did start out the talk saying how challenging it is for an unenlightened being to understand what enlightenment is. But let me just share something with you, that if an enlightened being was in a zone that became a war zone, they wouldn't be running away. They would be making wise decisions to get away, right? And they're not happy and joyful because of the war. They're not happy and joyful because they're leaving. They're happy and joyful despite these things are occurring, because they understand impermanence, that the place they're currently living is impermanent. They're not going to be there permanently, and they're not clinging to it for it to be permanent. And they also understand going away is not permanent either. They'll be able to come back at some point, potentially, right? And these bombs that are dropping, they're not permanent. So they understand that this is the way that the world functions, and they're not forming their inner feelings based on the things that are or are not happening. And I understand that's challenging for you to imagine, because that's not how your mind functions right now. But it can function that way. It's just a matter of training it.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, let me make one more round in all of our social media platforms. Looks like we have a question here. Yes, there's an individual on YouTube. You're welcome to ask any and all questions that you like. Although I'm getting ready to end class, so if I don't answer your question during the class, I can answer it afterwards. But you can put it there in the comment section. Okay, I don't see any other questions anywhere. So I'm just going to end class by thanking all of you guys for the discussion. Thank you for your interest to learn. Thank you for being dedicated and determined to continue your growth on the path to enlightenment. Next week, I'm going to be sharing chapter 4 from our book, which is the Four Noble Truths. We're just going to spend the entire class period just with the Four Noble Truths, because it's so important to have that breakthrough to understanding what is the cause of your discontent feelings. That's what the Four Noble Truths are essentially helping you to understand, is the problem in the mind, the cause of that problem, the elimination of it, and the path forward. So we're going to be spending time to make sure you guys understand that, the 3 universal truths and the Four Noble Truths. And then we'll have meditation and open up for questions as well. And then in this week, I'm going to be teaching at the temple, Harmony in Relationships. This is a course from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. here, where I'm going to be teaching all the teachings for developing harmony in your relationships. And it's going to be recorded. So if somebody would like to watch it, I've taught it many times in the past. It'll be on our YouTube channel and our Facebook group, and it's also on our podcast as well. So if you're looking for additional content above and beyond what you're currently learning in the group learning program, this might be a course that you're interested in exploring. So again, thank you all for learning. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for your interest. And perhaps I'll see you guys in a future class. Be well and take care. Sawadee krap.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To provide support for this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha. To access more teachings, visit buddhadailywisdom.com. There, you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Remember to establish a daily, consistent meditation practice, along with learning and practicing these teachings. A well-developed meditation practice is the foundation in which to train the mind to attain enlightenment.